Hello.
Hello,
Good
Kim.
morning.
Hi. This
How are
is
you?
Kim Babcock, our co-host. And here is
Yes,
Bella.
ma'am.
Bella Met, who's our
There's
co-co-host.
that baby.
She has to be in my lap all the time. Stay off my keyboard, though.
Oh,
How are you
sweet
doing?
baby. I'm good. My dog's locked out. He
Ah,
barks very, very loud, so
oh
he's
boy.
locked out.
Just like Gidget. I haven't picked her up yet. For that very reason. But anyway, hi, Eric. How are you doing?
Oh, hi, Mom. I'm
That's
good. I'm
good.
good, he says.
That's
I've
good.
been having a lot of dreams with Eric lately. A lot of
Really?
messages
Yeah,
coming
you
through in dreams.
have. At least
Yeah.
one I know of. Wow. What does that
Yeah.
mean,
And
Eric?
then I'm trying to get to my family. He says I'm trying to get through.
Oh. What kind of dance? Is
He
that?
says, I just need him to know I'm there. I just need him to know I'm there and I love him. I
Yeah.
shared a message with one of his sisters this morning. So just,
Oh,
whatever
really?
comes through in dreams, I'll pass it along. It came through really crystal clear and it's just been, resonating in my head over and over his words. So,
Oh, that's awesome. Was it
um,
Michelle or Christina or Annika?
um, Annika, it was for
Annika,
Annika.
really? Okay, good. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yep. It was interesting. Very interesting. We were all on vacation together, but and it's interesting because every time I see him, the way we're interacting in these dreams, it's him, knocking on my shoulder. Hey, can you tell them? Hey, because it's
Oh,
like I'm the only one that can see him in that state. I don't know.
yeah.
It's
Well, that's
interesting,
cool.
but
That's cool.
such a sweetheart nonetheless.
Oh,
Oh my
that's good.
goodness.
Yeah, he loves us and we love him.
He does. He loves his family. Absolutely.
What's not to love? Well, Eric, speaking of such happiness and such love, I want to talk about happiness, actually, if that's okay with you. What do you think?
Happiness feels good. He says happiness is good to talk about.
All right.
The
Well,
more,
this.
the better, he
Yes.
says.
So many people are unhappy, and so many people just have such trouble finding happiness. And it seems like a lot of times they should be happy, but they're not, things of that nature. So, why is that the case? Before we start talking about what can make us happy, let's figure out why so many people are not.
He goes, ooh, let's get into the guts of it.
Guts, man. Blood and guts.
He says, yeah, let's get deep because um, there's a whole lot of different dynamics to happiness, and the better you can understand it, the better you can align with it. He says the first thing people need to understand is it's not something you have to go and get. He says it's not something you have to go out and achieve and go do, and then that makes you happy.
Yeah, it feels like it
Um,
does, though. It feels like that way to me. I have to
that's the
achieve.
human, yeah, he says that's the human experience, and that based on most people, he says, based on your experience, is what gives you happiness. But happiness exists without anything. So there's ways that you can align with it without having to go through anything. Part of the reason he's trying to jump the gun here. He's trying to get to why people have a hard time achieving happiness and maintaining it.
Hmm.
He says it's because people base their happiness off of circumstances,
Mm.
circumstantial living. So if you can, as he goes, this is hard. This is a tall order for so many.
Mm.
But if you can not base your happiness on circumstances and realize the happiness is always within you, you just have to align with it and stay with it, stick with it, stay there. Then he's like, basically everything else that makes you happy is just like icing on the cake because inside you is your own inner peace, your own inner happiness. It's never going to be true fulfillment doesn't come from circumstances.
Yeah, but we're taught, I guess, by.
Fulfillment,
Go ahead.
yeah, he says fulfillment does come from achievements and relationships and conversations and events. You do get fulfillment and growth, but your personal happiness does not lie there. Um,
So
for an
fulfillment is
example,
different than happiness.
he says, yeah, but people get that tangled.
Yeah,
People get that mixed up.
sure.
Um, they need that sense of fulfillment to be happy, and they base that on events and circumstances. So he says, let's talk about why people hold on to things that make them unhappy, that they
Well,
know make them unhappy.
that's good. What can you be unfulfilled and happy before we go on?
He's thinking, he's pacing.
Of course.
He says, well, being unfulfilled leads you down the path to not just unhappiness, but depression, like a depressed state of being.
Okay.
Feeling that constant unfulfillment. Um, oh, he says, like self-fulfillment is knowing thyself. Yeah, he said it just like that, thyself. He says, no, fulfillment is knowing yourself. That alignment is what helps you achieve happiness. So he says, unfulfillment is typically because you're not aligned with yourself, which leads to unhappiness. So let's say you're at a job that you just freaking hate. He says, there's no fulfillment there. And he's like, Kim, you know what I'm talking about. I didn't hate physical therapy. I loved doing it, but I didn't feel fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
So I just grew depressed and, just slowly went
Sure.
down in my vibration. I just felt unfulfilled and unhappy. Um, so that's when you know you're not aligned with yourself, aligned with your purpose. When you're completely aligned with who you are, you have that ability to achieve fulfillment, which leads to happiness. But so many people base it on. See, to me, he's confusing me because this means the opposite or the same. He
Unconfuse
says,
us.
yeah, he says, so, okay. He's like, God, sometimes you're hard to talk to because stuff can seriously just go right over my head.
Yeah, me too.
Um, he says, it's not because I said, well, to me, it sounds like you're saying that it's based on circumstances, Well, circumstances are I have a better job that I love now and I'm fulfilled and now
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Yeah.
That's how I understand it.
Yeah.
But he says that's not it. What's happening is you are making choices that help you align with yourself naturally. When you feel more, let's say you're a nurse, but you want to, these are really random. You're a nurse, but you really want to work with animals. So you start working as a vet tech or, going to vet school. You're making a choice to realign with what feels natural, following your natural instincts. And if something feels more natural to you and you feel more fulfilled in that, obviously, he says your vibration's going to go up, and then you see happiness come into the picture. He says, but so many people hold, he says it's really just, it boils down to an issue of not being present with the moment that they're in as far as why do they hold on to things that make them unhappy? Part of it is humans need to rehash it, rehash it, rehash it to understand it, to think they're going to gain new understanding of something.
Sure.
But ultimately, you can replay it 20,000 times in your head, but it ain't going to change the outcome of something that's already happened. So he says you have to take any situation and circumstance that makes you unhappy, take it for what it is, learn from it, and let go. Let go of it. It's not a part of you anymore. Move on. And also, people, he says, people, here comes all the cuss words. He's like,
Go for
oh,
it.
man. He says, people internalize way too much shit. He goes, when shit happens around them or shit happens in the world around them, they internalize it and they think, well, what did I do wrong? And what do they not like about me? And he says, that stuff isn't meant for you to internalize, whether it's a disagreement with some coworkers or a relationship that went sour. You don't have to internalize every fucking thing that happens to you because that in itself is very damaging. Um, he goes, and will rob you from fulfillment and happiness.
Mm.
He says, but they do that. People do that so often. They internalize, and even in rehashing situations, they go back and they cut themselves apart, Mom.
So they just need to basically remind themselves, be in the moment. Don't go there. It could be some mantra, I guess. Don't go there. Stay in the moment. Don't go there.
He says, perfect mantra. He says, and I'm not telling you to forget and ignore, but learn from. You can only learn from something once and then move on.
Mm.
You can't keep going back and back and back and back over and over. That's what humans tend to do. It's why it's so hard for them to move forward and to bring their vibration back up when shit happens.
Well, why do they do that? To try to
A lot of,
understand it in different ways, or
he says, there's, I guess he's going to use me as an example.
of course.
There are,
You can use me as an example sometimes, Eric, if you want. Poor
yeah, no
Kim.
kidding. He, um, he says there's times when you do rehash situations in the past. Why do we hold on to shit when we know it doesn't feel good? It's sometimes it's an attempt to understand all the dynamics of it and see, did I look at it the right way? You know, people tear themselves up, he says, in trying to understand all the dynamics of a situation. But in all reality, the most important thing is what did you connect with immediately, no matter what situation it was? What did you get from it immediately? What felt natural in those moments that you were supposed to learn from? He goes, take that and then move on. Don't go back and think, okay, what am I missing? People want to dig up the shit and they want to,
I
he
know, I've
says,
done it.
oh man, that visual is disgusting.
Oh, Eric. Oh, no.
He's like they want to dig up the shit and smell it 20 times over to see if they're smelling anything new. Is there anything different there that I missed? Um,
It's like a
but
dog.
he
It's like a
says
dog. They'll
it's
just get
exactly
there
what
with
he's
their
showing me.
nose right up to a turd and just smell it and smell it and smell it and smell it.
That's exactly what he's showing me. He showed me a dog digging up shit and smelling it. Um, but he says we tend to do that. We tend to go back and re-dig it up and re-smell it, see if there's anything that we missed. And in doing that, oftentimes you guys, everybody, he says, you get in your own heads, people get in your own heads, and he gets a real deep tone. He goes, oh, oftentimes in doing this, you create more shit than what was already there. Um, you get too deep, you overthink, you overanalyze. It's much more simple. Take what you initially felt from that situation and move on. He says, but people have a hard time. They just want to hold on to that shit as long as they can.
I know. I hope it's not coming with. I hope it's only visuals you're getting and not smells too.
Yeah, thank God. It's
Yeah,
only visuals.
good. So, can you give us like a few tips, 5 tips, 3 tips, whatever, however many tips to attaining and maintaining happiness? Those they might be there might be different tips for attaining than for maintaining. I don't know. It's up to you.
He goes, well, let's do both. He
Okay.
said, when you first said, can you give us a tip? He said, shit or get off the pot. Move on. Get
There we go.
going. Keep forward momentum. Okay, but anyway, he's kind of playing around. So he says, that's some really good points, Mom. He says, attaining is one thing and maintaining is a whole another
Mm.
piece of the pie. Um, he says, attaining happiness comes through knowing and realizing. This kind of goes back to the self-worth and self-value, he's saying, that you don't place you shouldn't place your happiness on circumstances outside of you, on people outside of you. Sure, people can make you happy, circumstances can fulfill you, but ultimately, gathering a sense of self, he's doing this with his hands. He's
Oh.
going, collecting sense of self, like aligning,
Mm-hmm.
is going to bring you natural fulfillment. He says circumstances and people is not natural fulfillment. It's
Okay.
there's some
More
difference.
like
It's
contentment?
like one's organic and one's not, he
Okay.
says.
Got it.
So finding yourself, finding sense of self and accepting yourself is going to be organic fulfillment, which will lead to organic happiness that is
Mm-hmm.
within. And then maintaining that is knowing how not to internalize situations, events, knowing um, knowing that sense of self, no matter what circumstances you're up against, no matter what events you go through in life, being able to maintain that stronger sense of self is going to keep you happy, is going to maintain your happiness, he says. He
So
goes,
see,
it's all about maintenance.
yeah, I know. Uh, that seems like one of the most important things then is to really know and be your authentic self. And of course, that's going to take a lot of emotional honesty, self honesty. Is that one thing you're saying as a key to happiness?
He goes, yep. And that's when people tend to put the blinders on. He says, a lot of people don't want to be emotionally honest with their self because half the time they're afraid of what their own emotions are going to tell them, like the truth. They're afraid of the truth, he
Yeah.
says. But he actually got really sweet and genuine. He said, but the truth will set you free.
Mm.
Um, so the more you continue to put your blinders on and keep yourself in denial, um, it's going to be much harder. He shows me like this short kid on a playground trying to reach the monkey bars, and I just
Mm.
can't. I just keep jumping and I can't reach. He says it's going to be much harder to reach, achieve, maintain all the above happiness because
Mm.
if you keep your blinders on and keep denying yourself of your own truth, um, you're in a lower state
Yeah.
vibrationally.
What other tips for happiness do you have for us?
He says just building on what you said, being true to yourself, because so many people um, keep them. Because I asked him, I said, well, talk about relationships. Why are people either unhappy in relationships or can't move on from things happening in relationships?
Yeah.
Whether it's friendship, whether it's
A
a
love
marriage,
relationship?
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. He says, well, again, that's where you have to go back to one being honest with their self and their actual true ability. Are they capable of being honest with themselves in that situation? And also, a lot of times they're not capable of being that brutally honest with their partner or their friend because what they're feeling might be more deep and severe than what they've shared because they don't want to hurt their partner. They don't want to be completely truthful because they're afraid it might damage things. So they go back, they regurgitate the situations, trying to understand them, but being completely truthful is so hard for so many people. So in relationships, he says being truthful is actually, he's like going on a soapbox, but he says being truthful is actually going to um, spike communication. He says it's going to increase communication, and we all know that's the key to
Sure.
surviving anything.
Yeah.
He says, so be truthful in that communication because he goes again, he goes, see how it loops back around? He says, if you're truthful in your communication, you're honoring your natural state of being, your natural self, aligning with self, therefore coming to a happier state.
That makes sense.
He goes, if you're truthful, you'll be happier. If you tell the truth, if you share yourself truthfully with another, or even be true to yourself. He goes, you know what? And sometimes too, People think they have to stuff shit down and suck it up and move on. But if you can't, if you just can't get past something and it's hurt you so bad, you have to be truthful with yourself. Some people think, well, I'm falling out of love, but I got to stay in it because I have these vows.
Mm.
Um, he says, but if your heart isn't there, if that's not what you're hearing truthfully inside, why would you suck it up and continue just because?
Yeah.
No offense to anybody out there, but he says just because you made vows to somebody, being truthful to the way you feel is most important. And if you feel like you can't continue in a relationship, it doesn't mean you have to. You shouldn't have to. You should honor your true self. It
Yeah, and
might hurt while you go through that.
yeah, sure.
He says you'll ultimately achieve that happiness again.
Yeah, and being emotionally honest with somebody, it could destroy the relationship, but then maybe that relationship was not meant to be.
He says, right, getting people to be more truthful is so important. And he says, situations, everything can be perfect, but you still don't know why you don't feel something for somebody anymore like you used to. And if you're not honest, if you're not truthful with yourself, you're not going to be happy. It's going to be so much harder to maintain that state within yourself. He goes, and honestly, you're not being fair to yourself or your friend or your partner.
Yeah.
So,
You know what? Maybe I'm channeling this from you, Eric. Would be a good exercise to do. Write down all the things that you feel like you are not being honest with about yourself, and also write down everything you feel like you're not being honest with about whatever relationship or relationships you want to make better. And just writing them down sometimes will bring them into consciousness and then make you start thinking about how to handle that, and inspire you to go ahead and let the truth out, and find ways to handle whatever happens when the chips fall where they may.
he says, he's like, Mom, you're absolutely right, because when people write stuff down, sometimes they're surprised by what they're even writing.
I
But
know.
he says,
Maybe it's
it's
channeled from
very
their higher
therapeutic.
self, automatic writing from their higher self. That could be it too.
They should, he says, they should try that. People should try that. Just go with what feels natural to write down, even if you're like shocked by it. He goes,
Hmm.
even if it might not make sense. He says, the truth will come out, and it's very therapeutic. So more people
Yeah.
should write.
Yeah. I always
He
do that. I
says,
write the pros and cons of situations, or I write down all the things I'm happy about, all the things I'm unhappy about, so I could kind of take an inventory. So, any other last tips before we close, Eric?
he's being real mushy. He says, I love you, Mom, and I love all of you listening because by you tuning in, he says, all of you people that listen and follow the blog and watch along, you don't just do it for self. I've seen so many thousands share, and he's just passing along gratitude. He says, thank you for sharing what you come across on this video and on all the videos on all the different categories. He says, because if we continue to share, we can make such a large impact
Yeah.
on and helping each other. He goes, we're all in this together, and the more we realize that, the more we can work together to hold. He's being such a mush ball. He says
Oh, he can
to
be.
hold. Yeah, he says to hold each other's hand as we walk each other home.
Mm.
So he's just saying thank you. He says
Oh,
he's going like this. He says, I'll be your source of happiness. He
there
says,
we go. No,
um,
it's not external, remember? But, so everybody, if you want to talk to Eric or ask Eric questions, we have a radio show now every Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's on my blog. There's a little player thing on this right sidebar that you can click to listen now, or you can listen to the podcast, the last archived show, on a little icon that's just below that. So check it out. Prepare your questions and prepare to be amazed and have a lot of fun and enlightenment. Thank you, guys.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Kim. Thank you, Eric. I love you, my sweetie.
I love you, Mom. He's blowing
Bye.
kisses. So
Bye.
sweet.
He is. Bye.